Alrighty, so we've got a lot of people here. We're so excited to welcome you to today's session with OpenSesame and Meridian. We're going to be talking all about optimizing your diversity, equity, and inclusion potential within your organization. And without any further ado, I'll turn it over to our speakers.
Thank you. My name is Patrick Devlin. I'm the Chief Business Development Officer of Meridian Knowledge Solutions, and we're the sponsor of today's event, and just couldn't be more pleased to be working with our key partner, OpenSesame, to bring this important topic to all of you. If you could go to the next slide, just as a brief background on Meridian, we are a leading enterprise solutions provider in the LMS space and have been doing this since our founding in 1997. We are based right outside of Washington, D.C. in lovely Reston, Virginia, and are really proud to be supporting learning across a variety of different, strategic learning across a variety of different market segments, including the federal space, commercial, and a lot of state and local business as well. So welcome, and with that, we'll introduce the rest of the panelists.
Sorry, thanks so much, Patrick. I am Rashida Calhoun. I'm a strategic partner manager with OpenSesame, and I work really closely with Patrick and his team. And we are really thrilled to be able to bring this webinar to you today. One of our speakers, she's actually a rock star. Sorry, I have to say that I'm a little obsessed with her. She is our DEI expert here at OpenSesame. Liza, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Thank you so much, Rashida. It is truly a pleasure to be here with you all. Anytime we're in the D&I space, I'm just fired up and ready because I know there's at least one person in here who's probably going to go, wow, that was amazing, and wanting to connect so that we can build an awesome community of learners who are all about optimizing DE&I. Like Rashida said, my name is Liza Wisner. I serve you as your Senior Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Curation Specialist. And I have the pleasure of working with amazing people like Rashida. Now I've met Patrick and Michelle, I guess, in the background of Meridian. And so it's such a pleasure. And I want to thank Jessica so much for always making these events so amazing, and you for being here. So it's a pleasure to be here, Rashida. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much. So really quick, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about OpenSesame. We exist to develop the world's most productive and admired workforces. And I think that's a pretty lofty goal, but we do it. We do it daily. And one of the things that we know is important for the workforce is diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's become so important in 2020, and it continues to be important. And folks like you who are on here, L&D admins, continue to try to understand how you can incorporate these things into your learning, into your development program, so that then you can kind of push things out to your customers. So that's what we're going to do here today. Lisa's going to give us a presentation, but please, like Jessica said, we want you to use the chat. We want you to be vocal. And then towards the end, we have tons of questions that have come in through registration, and I'll continue to monitor questions as they come in, and we'll have a nice, good discussion. So let's jump in.
Yeah, and right there in front of you on the screen, you can see the question is, why are you here? So if you would be so kind, please let us know why you're here. There's a reason why you saw the title of this presentation and you're exchanging your time for spending time with us. So I want to know, what is it that made you want to come here? We want to make sure we're addressing all the things that you wanted addressed, but most importantly, we want to know, when you're doing this diversity, equity, and inclusion work, what is driving you? So you're here to gain knowledge. Thank you so much, Melissa. And then we have Susan. We're at the beginning of our journey into DE&I. That's fantastic. Continue to share with us why you are here, and I'm sure Rashida will be able to bring those in as they are engaging with us. And so I want to go to the next slide and just share with you why I asked you this question. So we have probably heard of Simon Sinek. I'm hoping that some of you have heard of Simon Sinek. I know we had a conversation backstage with Patrick and Michelle. We're talking about how Simon Sinek's book, Start With Why, is so popular. In fact, this book is not only popular, but if you've heard his TED Talk, it is the #1 TED Talk of all time. And so, Patrick, do you want to maybe share just a little bit about your affinity to this book?
Well, I mean, I've used this book as a teaching tool in my as a part of my career now since the day it dropped. I read this book, and it really helped shape the way that we think, not only at a big level from a company or an organization, but down to what you're doing with your teams and what you're doing with individual projects. There's no lens where this doesn't apply. Right. And I just think it really is, as I said earlier today, should just be mandatory reading for anybody at this stage. And it's what's great is it's all about business, but it's not. Right.
Yeah.
There's so many lessons that you can take away from this that you can use in your life as well. So can't recommend this book enough. I talk to my team about it virtually every day, as Michelle or anybody on my team that's here can tell you. And the webinar that we did on a different topic last week started with the same sort of reference. I just think it's a wonderful thing, and everybody should take a look at it.
Yeah, I always say that when something's good, then you start to see it in many different places. And so that's good to know that some other people value this book. And if you have not had a chance to read this book, the reason we're asking you why you're here is because the summary of this is that you need to operate within the golden circle, as Simon Sinek calls it. And I would even go a step further. In the D&I space, we probably see the why, the how, and the what. But I would even say that maybe we need to start with the who, right? So I would call Simon Sinek. I don't know, Patrick, if you have that kind of poll, if you know who Simon Sinek is, tell him we need to start with why 2.0 book that says start with who, identify who is in the room, and then ask why, and then the how, then the what. And so now
I'm on it.
You're on it. Perfect. Yes. Thank you so much.
I'm going to ring him up right now.
Ring him up and let him know that we're totally like redoing his book. If he's not going to redo it, we'll just take it over. We'll take it over and we'll just do it for him. Right. But yes, so I see Rashida can totally see there's a bunch of people saying why they're here to learn and possibly experience from each other in regards to diversity, equity, and inclusion. But frankly, on the next slide, I want to just kind of point your direction to, you wouldn't be here unless you already knew the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion, because the research is really, truly overwhelming. But as you can see on this slide, we have different research institutes that have actually given us a little bit of a gut check and a level set in regards to the value of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we know this already. We know there is a business case for DE&I. And I've selected a few, I guess you could say, research studies that are from different industries. And I'm sure in your own industry, you'll be able to find one that's actually specific to your industry in regards to why DE&I is important. So I have a challenge for you. Right now in the chat, just like when we used to fly and flight attendants would ask anyone in the exit row, do you agree being in the exit row? I ask you, do all of us in this room right now in this virtual space understand why diversity, equity, and inclusion are important? Do we understand that there is a business critical need for this? And if you agree, type yes in the chat. I want to see a waterfall of yeses. So if you're in this room right now, there's 32 people, 32 yeses, please. Because the research is overwhelming. So hopefully we're all on the same page, right? We get each other, right? On the next slide, you'll be able to see that we can even take it a step further. You've heard about the future of work being about the digital transformation. You've heard about technology, robotics, machine learning. And I would be so bold as to say, when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's even more compelling that we do have a future of work that is intersectional. In fact, when we think about the workplaces we have today as compared to even 5, 10, 15 years ago, it is different, right? This slide shows the research that there's more women in the workforce, there's more people of color. And as you can see, there's more than 2 times the people who identify as LGBTQIA+. This is really shaping our workplaces. And if you don't pay attention to these changes are happening right before our eyes, right? So it's already here and now. And if you're not paying attention to the fact that you have to create more inclusivity, you have to be able to train the people that are working in your organizations to be able to see things from a different perspective, quite frankly, you will not survive. The opportunity here is for you to be able to understand that, one, you could hire people to come in, but if they don't feel welcomed in the environment, they're going to be out just as fast as you got them in. So it's important for you to understand that another case for why you're in this space right now is hopefully that you get it. You get that the workforce has changed. So type a bunch of yeses in the chat if you agree with that, because we need to learn how to improve workplace culture, because the culture in the demographic makeup of our organizations has completely changed. It's completely intersectional. All right, so now I want to just point your direction to my why. I had the pleasure of working with an organization called Google. Hopefully y'all know Google. They're sort of a big company, but they did a big thing and they sort of served the world of work in a big way. They wanted to figure out how can they make their teams more successful. And in fact, I would be as bold as to say what they were looking for was they wanted only 10% more success. So this was the statistics of how Google was successful. They would start 10 projects, and out of those 10 projects, right? So we're thinking Google's $1 billion company, okay? They would start 10 projects, and only one of those projects would be successful. So they had a 90% failure rate, and they were still $1 billion company, okay? So let's just think through that. All they cared about was just an extra 10%, so maybe they can make double those billions, right? And what they found after all the research, and if you have not heard about Project Aristotle, which is what they dubbed this, it found that psychological safety was actually the #1 reason that team members are going to be successful. You know, in fact, if you have not heard about this study, you can find out more about it by reading a New York Times article that was written about it. And, you know, I had the pleasure of actually working within the Google team when this was going on. I was on a National Science Foundation grant where we were working with increasing the number of underrepresented students in science, technology, engineering, and math. And this study really impacted my work because initially we thought, okay, our kids need to be the smartest. They need to have the highest GPAs. They need to be the, you know, they need to show up and just know everything. They need to be the smartest engineers. And that was not it. The bottom line after years of research was that the biggest differentiator was how safe those employees or those students would feel when they joined a team. Did they have psychological safety? And if you know anything about Google, that changed the way they actually hire. You could be the smartest engineer, and if you do not provide psychological safety on your team, you will not be hired by Google. Because in fact, I don't think there's a college or a university that can probably teach you what's going on at Google, right? They probably have some, you know, some algorithms running and some systems running that colleges will probably be happy to learn about, because I'm sure they'll have to teach you all of that when you arrive there. And what they found is when they have team members who care about each other, that's where they had the critical piece that made them successful. It's all about the knowledge economy now. It's all about making sure that not only do you understand how people operate together, but the data was overwhelming. As you can see, there was 5 of them, the #1 being psychological safety. Out of all of those, none of those actually says that you needed to be the smartest person in the room. So a bunch of yeses again, if you agree that psychological safety is important. So that's my why. That's why I'm here. That's why I believe that diversity, equity, and inclusion is important. So let's go ahead and define for you diversity, equity, and inclusion. So diversity is, you know, I think when we think about diversity, a lot of times we think about the first column you can see, which is our demographic, right? Our demographic diversity. We think about our inherent diversity, which is maybe the traits we're born with, right? As you can see, our gender, our age, our race, our ethnicity. But I want to take it a step further and let you know that diversity is also acquired diversity, right? So the skills that you learn, which colleges did you go to? Which expertise did you have? What skills do you have? What affinity do you have? What hobbies do you enjoy, right? So all the things that you have, that also gives you diversity. The other thing is cognitive diversity, right? How do you approach problem solving? How do you think, right? How do you connect the dots? That is diversity. Diversity is a fact. It's the thing that we are, right? The next slide will show you the definition for equity. And I believe that words speak volumes. And so as you can see, sometimes equity is confused with equality. Yeah, when somebody says they want equality, which I think is today or is tomorrow equal payday, I'm not sure, but I somewhere or another, we're in equal payday mode right now for women. And so I would say that what we're looking for here is equity, right? Because the opportunity is that we want to have fairness, but true fairness comes with equity versus equality. As you can see with equality, everybody got a bike, right? Isn't that fair? Like, you all got a bike. But could everybody get to the destination? We needed to provide equity so that we could be able to provide fair opportunities for everybody to reach their full potential. So hopefully that's clear, equity versus equality. And the next definition is inclusion. Inclusion is about action. It's the effort to promote full participation. And yes, that's totally fine. If you want to go to the next slide, Jessica, thank you, because the next slide actually just summarizes our conversation about defining diversity, equity, and inclusion. And if you've ever watched Netflix, I love asking people to put yeses in the chat because it should be like pretty easy. So yes in the chat if you know what I'm talking about when I say Netflix. So Netflix has a pretty amazing, I think her title is Chief Diversity Officer, and their Chief Diversity Officer is Renee Myers, and she's known for saying that diversity is being invited to the party, inclusion is being asked to dance. But I can even take it a step further, and I had the pleasure of visiting with Harvard's Senior Advisor of Diversity and Belonging, and she told us that belonging is not only being invited to the party, but knowing the words of the songs at the party. As in, you had a part to play when they were picking the playlist of the songs, right? So imagine going to a party and you don't get the music, right? You're like, yeah, I'm there, they're asking me to dance, but I just don't understand what they're saying or how this is going. But if you were included in such a way where you got to pick your favorite songs and that Spotify playlist or whatever the DJ was using was part of your mix of what you enjoy, imagine how much more fun you would be having. That is what we're looking for. Because on the next slide, you will see that what we're looking for is that emotional outcome of belonging, but it has to do with the logic. You know, there's this, I guess, challenge. You know, it's almost like the yin and the yang, right? Emotion versus logic, right? We know what's right, but our logical mind tells us we want to move quickly, so we don't have time to consider that, right? We don't have time for equity maybe because we just need to do this, right? No, what you have to realize is the only way that belonging is going to happen is if you have that emotional outcome connected to strategy and the work that you're doing. So the big picture is the way our brain works. In fact, I had the pleasure of working with an amazing woman. Her name was Kathy, and can't remember her last name, but she was a neuroscientist, and she gave an amazing presentation about how our brains are wired in such a way where we have to understand that we are reacting to situations and we may not even understand why. We may not understand why we react the way we do. And it's just a blueprint of how we are raised, I guess, right? How you grow up. And to mirror the Project Aristotle that Google did, when you dig deeper into their study, you start to realize that what they started doing was teaching their teams emotional intelligence. Because what they found was you could be really smart, but that's only 10% of the success that you're going to have because you're using your conscious mind. Most of the time, we're using 90% of our brains. We're using 90% of our brains to do our life in general, which is emotional intelligence. When you have that gut feeling, when you have a certain way that you do things, when you capitalize on your strengths, if you are a strengths finder, I guess you could say, advocate like I am, I absolutely love strengths work. And it's all about capitalizing on everyone's strength, really understanding that everybody has a part to play. And the diversity of the perspectives is what you're looking for. If there's two people in the room who are thinking like Liza Wisner, then one of us is irrelevant in the conversation, right? We don't need, I call them bobbleheads. We don't need bobbleheads in the room. We need innovation. We need new ideas. But we also need to provide some psychological safety so there's not the fear of being yourself, right? We need to create that environment where team members feel safe to fail even, right? In front of each other. If you want to unpack the study of emotional intelligence, there's a really great book by Daniel Goldman, and the book is actually entitled Emotional Intelligence. It's a great book. So just like Simon Sinek's book, you need to get this book if you are trying to do any work in regards to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so as we are moving into the strategies of how we're going to move our needle, right, from maybe being reactive to diversity, equity, and inclusion, maybe thinking about social pressures making us do this work, to being optimizing where we are actually impacting the future and being the change, you have to see diversity as all the pieces of the puzzle being there, right? And what we're looking for is that inclusion safety. So when we're talking about psychological safety, there's different stages of psychological safety. And the very first stage is inclusion safety, basically satisfying that basic human need of feeling connected, the emotion of feeling seen and heard. That's what people need to feel. So all hands need to be in, right? We can't have one person putting the puzzle together and going, okay, I put the puzzle. No, everybody has to come at the table. We're not just talking employees, we're talking vendors too. And then also creating an opportunity for maybe the community to be involved in regards to the impact that your organization is having, your social and your brand reputation based on your diversity, equity, and inclusion work. And to bring it all together, it's like as though if we're wearing glasses. And I like that Rashida's wearing glasses today. Thank you, Rashida, because you're going to be the prop for the model for today, because the point here is that we're all too often, we find ourselves polarized by differences, right? And so what I would challenge you to do is just see where the magic is. If you took off your lenses that you're seeing through and you flipped it with another colored lens of somebody else's. And I think that's where the magic happens, when you're strong enough to be able to see somebody else's talents and see their strengths and see how their contributions are positive towards the success of an organization. So we want to create psychological safety by seeing the differences, right? And regardless of those differences, we know that we're acknowledging the humanity of the fact that we will be better because of these different perspectives. So yes, flip those lenses on and make sure you're seeing your perspective, but also leave room for another perspective. All right. So the beauty about this presentation today is at OpenSesame, we've really dedicated ourselves to operationalizing diversity, equity, and inclusion. So in the chat, we will have an opportunity for you to take a survey where you can actually find out what level you are at in your diversity, equity, and inclusion progress index. We have 4 different levels that we will help you map to. And the reason we created these was because we believe in a unified language. And a lot of times, I can't remember who said in the very beginning of the presentation, if you want to put in the chat, I'm just beginning this process and I came here to learn, right? What to do in this beginning process. Well, if you want to go to a destination, so I'm here in Texas, if I wanted to go to Colorado, I need to know where I am at, right? If I tell Google Maps or wherever my GPS is for the car, it's going to try to first figure out where is Liza before it gives me a map of how to get to Colorado driving, right? So you need to know where you're at before you figure out where you're going in regards to your DE&I work. And so this could be the first step in terms of you figuring out your DE&I, I guess you could say maturity, right? In terms of progressing through the index. So we have 4 different levels that you would mature through. The first level, and I think the next slide will actually show you that. Thank you so much, Jessica, is being unmindful. And I see this as the level where I kind of like this picture, you're just kind of hanging out, we're good, nothing's happened. I always say sometimes we don't have any suits, as in lawsuits, right? Nothing's happened, right? You're just kind of cruising and making your money, right? But I will tell you this, typically, if your organization is at this level, if you do the survey and you come out as level 1, what this means is that, you will suffer if you're faced with adversity, right? When change happens, like for example, all the businesses who probably didn't survive because of COVID or didn't survive because of the social unrest or whatever happened, change is inevitable. Growth is optional. If you're just sitting there waiting for things to happen, then things will happen to you, right? So failure to change and move in the direction of more is going to be detrimental to you. So at this stage, your job is to make sure that you're thinking clearly about how to move the needle. And the way you do this is by by moving towards a proactive stage, but you could also come out as being reactive. So level 2 is being reactive. And I like to think about this level as you're kind of playing defense, right? So I think, Rashida, you mentioned a little bit about March Madness, I think when we were backstage. And I was thinking like, yeah, if March Madness is going on and the teams are really just being defensive, are they ever going to score, right? Are they ever going to win? No, you have to be offensive as well, right? So in this level, what it looks like is that you're reacting to things that are happening within not only your organization, but also externally in terms of social pressures. So pay attention to where you're at in this level, because you don't want to be at the mercy of what's going on in the world or an employee putting in a complaint. You want to move into level 3, which is being proactive. And in this level, you're actually predicting the future. You have measures in place to make sure that you're moving the needle towards optimizing the organization. So the next slide will show you how you start to predict the future. By being proactive, you start thinking ahead. You start scoring, right? Because now you're being offensive. You start working on what I call culture change. This is actually the stage that's transformational. It's the hardest stage. And any athlete can tell you that there's a point in their training that they start to feel the pressure, right? In the very beginning, you're just kind of getting it. And then there's a point before you become, I guess you could say, world-class Olympic level, where it feels like such a heavy lift. And any star athlete will tell you that the difference between an Olympic style athlete and an average athlete is so negligible, literally. And if you play golf, then you'd probably realize it's probably like 4 or 5 strokes, right, on the golf course. That could be the difference between you being a professional and you being an amateur. It's really just that one putt or whatever it is, right? This stage is so critical. If you come out as level 3, just know that you are doing the heavy lift right now, because this is where you're going to be able to gain clarity on the work that you're doing. As you can see here in the picture, we're starting to build roadmaps of where we're going. We're building a strategy and we're building value. The next level after that, once you're past that, right, you always go past that. And I think if you're a marathon runner, I'm trying to bring everybody in this, right? So if you run marathons, if you're an endurance runner, you know that there's that point where you get into a runner's high, right? Where you're like, I can do this, right? I'm past that feeling of, I'm gonna just pass out right now. And then you get into this, I guess, bliss, where you're just like cruising. When you're in level 4, you're cruising, you're on cruise control, you're creating the future, you can do this. Your organization has literally started to define what it looks and feels like to be the best in your industry. You're optimizing. If you come out as an optimizing organization, you're a rock star. We need to talk. Put my contact information here because I want to find out what you're doing, how you're doing it, because this is really the highest stage, right? You're doing all the work as it relates to the competencies in your organization. You have your compliance down. You're providing opportunities for everyone to rise up in your organizations. And you're also playing a part in regards to social justice, treating people equitably and ethically. And so with that, after you fill out the survey, you will have an opportunity for us to walk you through the 10 paths to optimize your diversity, equity, and inclusion potential. These 10 paths have actually been divided up into 3 levels, and the very first 3 are based off of Simon Sinek's book, which is why. So the very first 3 are your why, that you're going to be doing this DEI work. The next 3 are your how. And then the next 3 are the what. What are you going to do? So institutionalization refers to getting leadership buy-in. Creating a DE&I vision is all about creating a statement that everyone can see as your North Star. You need to create a vision that is enduring, right? That is going to create long-term results for your organization. And sometimes this can be the development of a diversity statement. The next is your D&I strategy. And then after that, you start to work on the how. And the how is all about building a very strong learning culture. It's important to understand that whatever your employees are doing, whether it's the DE&I work or their job skills, building a strong learning culture is the only way to be able to manage change within your organization. And if you don't have learning embedded within the workflow, then it's going to be tough because it'll feel like a heavy lift. The next stage is creating a collaborative culture, and then being a result-oriented culture. It's important to be result-oriented because you need to measure, what gets measured. What does Peter Drucker say? What gets measured gets done, right? So you need to make sure you're measuring your results, right? Are you assessing the effectiveness of what you did? And I think, Patrick, did you want to add something there? About Peter Drucker?
Sorry, I just had I was gonna finish the quote for you if you were struggling with it, but it sounds like
well, when you came back on the camera, I was like, does he know Peter Drucker? I want to know Peter Drucker, right?
I'm gonna call him too. Do you want? What do you want me to tell him?
You need to tell him that then he needs to create a D&I book about how to measure results for D&I. The Effective Manager is the book that he has. Maybe he can do a 2.0 that's the Effective, Diverse, Equitable, and Inclusive Manager. That's what he needs. He needs a 2.0 book. I think you got everybody on the phone, so you and I need to chat later.
I got the Rolodex.
Thank you.
All right.
And then the next thing is all about the what. And the what is the work you're going to do, right? So you've done the heavy lift from 1 to 6. And then the what is making sure that your talent management team really, truly understands that. Are you paying attention to your recruiting? Who are you recruiting? How are you recruiting? Is your recruiting in line with the industry that you're in, right? So if you know that there's a percentage of graduates in a certain degree, and that's what you're looking for, are you getting that same equivalent percentage of people applying? If they're not, then look at your recruiting, right? Hiring, who are you hiring? Who gets promoted? Audit your compensation, right? Do you have equal pay, right? Ask questions that are really telling in regards to interviews, right? You want to make sure you don't have bias in your interviews. So those are all the things you can think about in terms of talent management. And then performance management. We already talked about results, measuring results, right? I would even go a step further and let you know that your employees know what you value by what you measure. And so performance management is so important. We have some organizations who don't even value and respect the individual enough to give them a performance evaluation of how they're doing, to give them feedback on, you can improve here, you can do this better, this is your plan for moving your career ahead. How about we start to create maybe a reduction in the bias of performance evaluations, and maybe create some equity in regards to the outcomes, right? Provide some opportunities where everybody can rise up, where everybody can meet those OKRs. If you have OKR tracking, or however you measure your goals within your organizations, make sure that they are opportunities for everybody to succeed. And then last but not least is creating an equitable and inclusive culture. And this is truly just about having a lens towards equity. When you're making your decisions, are you really truly seeing the truth? Because the truth is, we do have underserved and marginalized communities. We do have individuals who systemically the opportunity is not there. They may not even know that opportunity is there, and there are barriers in the way of them having that opportunity. And are you truly creating a fair opportunity within your organization? And then last but not least, if you're doing the heavy lift, you're thinking about your marketplace, and you're really thinking about the fact that your company nowadays is being judged on the basis of how you treat not only your employees, but your customers. And I'm sure if you go on social media, you will see all the examples of how not to do it. Sometimes that's what ends up happening, right? When something goes wrong, the world will let you know. And employees are going to social media to let us know when they don't feel that the organization is treating them fairly. And so it's important at this stage to make sure that your commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion is really the understanding that it is your brand reputation. Your employees represent your brand. So it's about keeping your talent, but also developing that loyalty of employees and customers. And so with that, I just want to graciously let you know that as soon as you fill out the survey, and some of you may have already filled out the survey, you're going to get access to our entire diversity, equity, and inclusion toolkit. Not only does OpenSesame provide you with the world's largest catalog of diversity, equity, and inclusion training, in fact, award-winning diversity, equity, and inclusion training, we also provide you with resources that I call the bookends, right? You can't just deliver e-learning and say, okay, take that course, see you later, you got it, right? No, if you're a learning practitioner, you know you can't do that. You have to provide some possible pre-assessments, and also give managers the opportunity to be able to tee up what you're trying to deliver, right? So we create all those bookends for you, and we go beyond e-learning. So we also give you resources in regards to PDF documents, and like, for example, the survey that you probably all just filled out. Hopefully you've all filled it out. And tons of other opportunities to watch more webinars. If you want to learn how to create a diversity statement, we have an amazing presentation you can watch where our equity consultant, Tara Cooper, unpacks what diversity statements are. And so I can go on and on and on about the amazingness that you're going to receive when you engage with our toolkit. So with that, I just want to thank you all so much for your time. I have had such a pleasure meeting with everybody who has been preparing for this presentation. And I know because you all submitted a whole bunch of questions that we need to leave some time for Q&A. So Rashida, tag, you're it.
I am it. Thank you so much, Liza. So now we get to the super exciting part where you guys get to get involved, and we're going to answer some of your questions. I just want to say that maturity survey that we do for DEI, I love it so much because I think it allows us the grace that sometimes isn't always afforded when it comes to conversations about diversity, equity, and inclusion. It can be a very vulnerable place to be in, to say, hey, I'm going to assess where I am, because you don't really know where your organization is going to land. But one of the things that I've seen as we've rolled this out is just like an overwhelming amount of grace. Like, it doesn't matter where you are. The fact that you're here, you know, some of you mentioned that you're at the beginning. That's awesome, right? We love that you're at the beginning. Everyone obviously is not going to be at the fourth stage of this. The fact that you're here and that you're starting is so, so big. And I know that your organizations and your customers are going to be so grateful for that. So with that, let's move. I've got a ton of questions. I'm just going to start picking them out, and feel free in the chat to throw in other questions as well if you think of things. So the first question, kind of a tough one, Liza, but I think it's a good one because we got it in a couple different ways. How do you overcome the resistance to employee surveys? Folks want to know how, they want to do these surveys so they can figure out how their employees feel, but it sounds like a few folks are experiencing some resistance to folks participating.
Yeah, so I'm assuming the goal here is that there's maybe an employee engagement survey, or is it a
That's
DNI
right.
survey? So let's just think through it, like in fact, like if it was a DNI survey. So first of all, I would say if you just submit a survey and you don't have any reason to submit the survey, like maybe people didn't understand why this survey was being given to them, start with why. That may be part of the apprehension. And I would even go a step further and say sometimes the surveys that are submitted are not anonymous. And so when somebody knows that their name is going to be associated with their true feelings, they check themselves, especially in a work environment, right? Because you know that your livelihood is connected to your answer. And so what I would say is maybe one thing that you could do is, first of all, make sure that there's I am a golfer, so I'm saying tee up, right? But, load the bases before you hit the home run, right? So make sure that, did I say that right? I didn't even play baseball, so I probably said that all wrong. But the point is that hopefully you get it. Make sure that there's some excitement. Make sure maybe there's possibly a video from the CEO talking about not necessarily the survey, but how important this is. And imagine, like, just have people literally dream their best workplace. Like, what would make them throw those covers off? Have them send those in. Get people all excited about this. So when they're filling out the survey, it feels like, I'm going to fill out the survey because I want my dream to come true, right? So, so I would say anything that you're ever doing, start with why. Always start with, why are we doing this? And then why would somebody fill this out? And so if there is that apprehension, maybe it's the understanding that you don't have that buy-in from that person or those individuals, right? They don't feel like, why should this matter? And they'll probably fill out the survey just to fill it out with all averages down the path, and you've not gotten any results, right? So one, make sure that it makes sense and it's speaking to the people. And two, be bold enough to possibly use a third party to assess the survey or make it anonymous and confidential.
Well, Liza, if I could, I would also like to suggest that a lot of that, it comes with a lack of trust, right? And if you already are in an environment where you don't have that psychological safety, you can't solve it through a survey, right? Yes. If you're surveying for that because you already know it exists and you have a problem, deal with it and figure out how you can change. If you can't get people to respond in a survey, then you already have a trust issue. And so what you need to do is deal with that. And when I say deal with it, it normally, something like this is a tone that comes from the top down. Absolutely, that's right. 100%. And if you've got a problem at the top, it's very, very difficult to solve this. And so don't ignore it. Don't make believe that you can do all this superficial, all these things superficially and not deal with the issue. Because that will only deepen the mistrust that that exists in your environment. It really will. And so if you know you have a problem, don't try to solve it. Don't try to band-aid it with hey, we're doing a survey. Deal with the problem. And those problems are typically going to be in leadership roles and that can be tough, especially if it's at the top. It can be tough, but you can't make believe it's going to go away because you're doing these other things.
Yes. I heard you say trust, and Jocelyn says, yes, trust is key. It reminds me of Stephen Covey. He talks about with people, you need to go slow. With processes, you need to go fast, right? So if your processes within the organization, you can go fast, but when you're working with people, take your time, right? So take your time to assess. The fact that they're not filling out the survey, I guess, just like Peter said, is they don't trust you. So work on that.
Yeah.
Right. And so kind of tagging on to the conversation of surveys, there was a comment about optimizing surveys. And I think that is a perfect tie back to you talking about the intersectionality, right? A lot of times when these surveys happen, we're looking at maybe things that are just gender specific, or maybe we are kind of tagging race in there, but not specifically looking at the experience of a specific gender and a specific race and ethnicity and things like that. So do you have any tips on how to optimize a survey to include intersectionality?
Yes. And in fact, I will take you one step further and tell you the company that I think is doing this marvelously. Their name is Culture Amp. And they are a survey company that has literally like blown me away in terms of the resources that they're providing. You can go to their website and find a survey that they're a survey company like Qualtrics is. And what they've done is they've developed a survey that truly spans the breadth of your employees' experiences in terms of their emotional needs, right? Do they feel like their voice belongs? Do they feel like their voice is heard? All those questions, in addition to the demographic questions of who is represented in your organization and who do you want to be your monitored groups, right? So typically your monitored groups are the underrepresented groups. So in every organization, it's different. So after you do the first assessment, remember the first thing you have to do is create a strategy. And the only way to do that is to do an assessment in the beginning. And as soon as you do that, then you'll be able to know who is here, who is underrepresented, where do we want to go? And then as you're doing those assessments of belonging and as you're doing the assessments of inclusivity, you start to see demographically who feels like they belong more than others, right? And so hopefully that's making sense, Rashida, in regards to an answer. The goal here is to make sure that you're measuring based off of the facts. So you need to make the facts match what the emotion is. The facts are, this is who's in your space. The facts are, this is who's applying for your positions. And then what's the results, right? And sometimes exit interviews are telling as well. So you could even pull in resources. You can pull in information from why did this person leave, right? Did they leave because of another opportunity? Was that the truth? Because that's usually what everyone says, right? Oh, career opportunity. When really they were escaping that feeling of dread when they show up to work, right? What's the truth there, right? What's the truth of why there was an exit?
Good. So you talked about measuring programs in your presentation, and we actually have a question that says, what are some tangible metrics that you could recommend other than just hiring?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, we have an amazing course that's going to be launching in May. Rashida, you probably don't know this, but we're working with one of our amazing consultants, April Allen. She's coming up with how to measure DE&I, and I can literally just tell you right now that it's going to be truly amazing. And the way you measure your DE&I is about making sure that you're paying attention to all the parts of your organization that have to do with employees. A lot of times DE&I is seen as this other thing, right? It's seen as, that's just this thing we got to do. DE&I is your business, right? Employee engagement is DE&I. Employee health and wellness is DE&I. It's all the pieces of the puzzle that make your business successful. So all those metrics actually matter. And specifically, the metrics that have to do with representation. Who is represented in your organization? So do an assessment of the percentages of people in your organization and then pay attention to who your monitored groups are. If you're trying to move the needle in regards to a certain demographic being included, then you'll know where you need to go. But you could also pay attention to the labor market, right? So pay attention to your industry. The industry that you're in will actually tell you whether you're at your benchmarks or you're exceeding. You may do the measure and go, we're really awesome, right? But what I would even say a step further, and somebody put the consumers also, yes, we need to pay attention to our consumers. What I would say is even a step further is when you figure out representation, sometimes when you look at the whole organization, you look pretty good, right? Because you have a bunch of women and you have minorities, right? But when you look at the top 10%, it is like a complete flip, right? It doesn't even look remotely like the rest of the organization. That's telling as well. So pay attention to who is represented in all the different levels of your organization. Who are your managers? Who is your executive leadership team? And who is your frontline team? And then the next thing is retention. Who stays? Who leaves? Paying attention to the average tenure, recruitment, and that can go on and on. Again, we're having an amazing course, and we have tons of other courses that you can take at OpenSesame, because we have tons of training regarding measuring. But there's this one course that really put our hearts into in regards to how to measure DEI, and it really goes into the 3 R's, right? You have to make sure you have that representation, retention, and then I can't remember the 3rd R, but it's really about making sure that you're paying attention to all the different numbers that have to do with your employee's life cycle. So you're paying attention to how people are flowing in your life cycle, and that's going to be how you start to measure the change within your organization.
So it feels like Christmas. I did not know that we had a course coming out on measuring DEI. So I'm excited about that. And everyone, you have to wait until May to figure out what that 3rd R is.
Yeah.
I do love that you talked about retention, because I feel like a lot of times, and what we saw recently is folks saying, we're going to hire more, right? We're going to kind of try to get more diverse candidates in our pipeline, sort of forgetting about that retention piece, right? What's the experience like for folks who are marginalized that already exist in, in your organization? So I love that you talked about retention.
Yes.
The next one is a tough one. So the question is, what can you do to help staff accept DEI material, training, and objectives without making them feel put out for their conservative beliefs?
Right. I mean, again, with the why, right? I have to always state the fact that when you ask questions like, for example, give me a time when you felt you didn't belong. And sometimes people even go back to when they were kids on the playground, right? Their friends didn't make them feel like they belong. You always have to go back to the core of people feeling that emotional pull of being on a team that really cares about them. So my recommendation would be that a lot of times DE&I is seen as, DE&I equals social justice, right? That's not what we're going for. What we're really going for is that we want everyone's voice to matter. And so when we have, I guess the statement was more conservative voices, and the assumption here is that we're looking at people who may have probably not feel comfortable hearing the word racism, maybe hearing the word white privilege or privilege in general, right? So this may be an environment where you're not there yet, right? You have to meet people where they're at. And if people really truly understood the definitions of why we're doing this work, I can promise you that they would see this as, this isn't work that's just for the workplace. This is work for our community. And this may be work that's also needed in their own homes, right? So in terms of thinking about DE&I work, we're back to the why. Because at the end of the day, if you don't understand the definitions of these words, like I would even be as bold as to say the definition of equity, I think sometimes that graphic of what equity is telling to everyone. It's like, yes, you want everybody to get there, but you're not providing the opportunity. How is everyone going to get there if they don't have the same opportunity? And if you had somebody in your family who needed to have equity, would you be saying, well, that's just not how I feel about it. I prefer it to be just everyone gets the same bike. No, you would not, because you would want your family member to be taken care of in their workplace and in the community. So I would say start from level 1. Start with the knowledge, skills, right? Start to feed the brain in terms of the common language. We need to start speaking this common language of microaggression, unconscious bias. This needs to be part of our conversations, so that the reason why it's being brought up is because there's a spotlight on it, and for good reason. And so start with first the understanding of the terminology, and then we move into the behavior change. But sometimes we skip the knowledge and try to have behavior change. Like as soon as you know this, then you should be acting a certain way. It doesn't happen like that. From theory to practice to mastery. Create opportunities for people, meet them where they're at, and create opportunities for them to practice.
Yeah, I would also like to add that, your start with why, perfect, right? And I think that so often the training that most people have been exposed to throughout their careers is required training with the primary goal of reducing risk. It's risk mitigation. And so a lot of times people just assume when you're approaching them, well, this is another risk mitigation issue. And I think that's where the start with why can be so powerful in this regard, because it's not about risk mitigation. It's what you said earlier. The world is changing. The world of business is changing. Our world is changing. And you're either going to change or you're going to get run over. You will fail to be a competitive business or competitive organization, a competitive employer, all of those things, if this is not addressed properly. And those who do it well are going to succeed, and those who don't are going to not succeed. And I think that starting with that why and really framing it as a competitive imperative in a business environment, and don't try to get soft with this and this and this and this. This is not about risk mitigation. This is about our future success as an organization, as an employer. And I think if you make that clear, and I can't stress enough how much that has to be clear from the top. Don't take a shortcut. Don't think you can do all of these things and get the top to buy in later, right? If it's a clear message that's coming down from the top of the organization, people will come along. And if it's not, you're going to struggle. And I think that's where that start with why can be so valuable in this context, to just make it clear. This is not about risk mitigation. This is not about avoiding a lawsuit. This is about being a competitive employer and being competitive in whatever respective space you might be participating in.
I love that, Patrick. I got chills. I don't know, Lisa, we might have to add Patrick to our panel just forever whenever we do DEI.
It literally is. It's literally like value, right? It's like value. Stacking the deck. So Patrick, you're tagged in. We're gonna be filling up the calendar.
So we're almost on time, but we have one more question that I think is particularly important for the audience that you serve, Patrick. And so maybe we'll start with you with this one, and Lisa, you could follow up with anything. But folks are asking questions about how have you maybe seen your customers deal with diversity, equity, and inclusion post the executive order that came out last year? Can you share any insight that you have heard from customers on that?
When you say the executive order, can you put that in more context for me? Because I think you're talking about where the administration like almost said you can't do this training. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, so I'm piecing it together from a few different questions, but that's what I'm thinking that it is. The administration, the executive order that came out from the previous administration, where it was kind of talking about not being able to do DE&I training
within the federal,
yeah,
right.
Correct.
So we do have a big presence in federal government, and what I will tell you to a person is the people that we engage with in federal were appalled by it. And honestly, I don't think I would say it went largely ignored. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, but it went largely ignored. And if anything, I think it highlighted even more to many of the people that we work closely with how important it was to continue to do these types of programs, and how significant. You know, I even had an off the record conversation with one that said, "Hey, it must be working."
Nice.
It must be working because
I love it, Patrick. I love it. If you were in the room right now, I'd be like fist bump, high fives. That is perfect.
Yeah. So that, you know, so that would be my comment, is that it was definitely a shot across the bow, but maybe if it wasn't, you know, but I think mostly it went largely ignored from the people that I know.
Got it. And Lisa, have you seen any customers have to make any shifts in how they delivered their DE&I training within their organizations?
No, and in fact, you know, what I can say about that executive order was, I feel like it just said a bunch of stuff, but there was nothing to do. Because if you were truly doing true DE&I work that was truly in servitude to employee engagement and community success, that executive order had nothing to do with you. And so you could continue business as usual, providing training that helps people understand why it's important to have a variety of perspectives in the workplace for economic success, right? And so from the work that we did, you know, I feel like sometimes I'm in the trenches with our customers. So for those of you who don't know, as the senior curator of diversity, equity, and inclusion, our customers reach out to me and ask me to curate the courses for them. So when this happened, a lot of our customers who were either federal contractors or were with the federal government were like, "Oh my gosh, can we fix this?" And after analyzing the executive order and analyzing the content that we had, we were good. So there was no changes to be made.
Got it. So I hope that is helpful for the few folks who submitted that question. I think that's all we can do for right now because we're coming up on the hour, but this has been absolutely amazing. Patrick, thank you so very much for partnering with us on this webinar. I hope for everyone that it was helpful. On the screen, you'll see if you want to get in touch with us at OpenSesame, feel free to reach out to me. If you want to get in touch with anyone at Meridian, feel free to reach out with Patrick. We will be sending the recording. So for those of you who were kind of writing and jotting away, trying to get all the notes, we'll send the recording out for you to have, and you'll get the slides. And I think that's it. Any parting words, Patrick or Liza?
Just thank you all for participating. Really appreciate it.
Yes, I thank everybody as well. Thank you so much, Rashida.
My pleasure. Thank you both. Everyone have a happy Thursday.